Happy Friday, welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. If this is your first time watching Balancing the Books, I do this every single month where I keep track of all of the books that come on and off my TBR throughout the month, and I try and keep those numbers balanced. Ideally, I try and get those numbers going down, but you can't win every month. So at the beginning of August, I started with 46 books on my TBR. Let's see how I did. The first book I read all the way at the beginning of August was Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stephens. I absolutely loved this book and it was so not what I expected. So what I knew about this book initially is that it is about a true story of these terrible few months that Chopin spent in Mallorca with his lover George Sand, or George Sand. I know nothing about these real historical figures, so I just didn't think that this book was going to be for me. But a few weeks before I read it, I went to an event where the author Nell Stephens was speaking along with Julia Armfield, who's another author I really like, and Nell was just brilliant. She was such a great author to listen to. I loved all of her answers to the questions. She was so accessible in the way that she presented how she got into the story and why she was interested in it in the first place, and it instantly made me want to pick up the book, and I'm so glad I did. I'm sure if you know a lot about Chopin, then you will particularly love this, but like going in blind as if he was just a fictional character that she'd made up really works. The reason for that being that the narrator of this book is unlike any narrator I've ever read a book from before. She is a teenage ghost. So the whole book is narrated from the perspective of Blanca, who is a 14-year-old girl who died this really tragic death that we will learn about as the book goes on. And ever since then, which was hundreds of years earlier, she has been haunting this monastery where Chopin eventually comes to stay. And she is quite the character, and actually I've met Nell Stephens again since then. I got to ask her more about Blanca, and I loved her explanation for how she came up with Blanca's character. Blanca is, in the words of one of my colleagues, I'm paraphrasing, but she described her as a queer, vengeful, horny ghost, and that's exactly what she is. So even when she was alive, through flashbacks, we learn about her life, we learn about her coming into her sexuality, developing a libido. She's a really funny character. But after she dies, she realizes that while when she was alive, yeah, she thought men were pretty, it's after she dies she realizes that it's really women that she likes. And so she falls in love with George, Chopin's lover. It's such a strange concept for a book, learning about these real historical figures through the perspective of a teenage ghost who fancies one of them and can kind of go inside their heads and learn more about their past and even their futures that way. It's really, really interesting narrative device. But yeah, I loved it. It was a really, like, borrowing from the title, it was a really delicious book. I found I wanted to be reading it all the time. I didn't want to put it down and go to work, just wanted to be in this world. And so I mentioned that I had that really interesting chat with the author about creating Blanca. So Nell Stephens came into our office last week to do a book club with us there, and I asked her about how she developed Blanca, and she was saying that she kind of represents the, well, Nell's own experience of queerness in kind of the realizations that you might make later in life, and then looking back, kind of reinterpreting and re-understanding everything that had happened to you before that. And when you then go back and put that into a historical context where they wouldn't have had the same words and labels and understandings that we do now, it was quite a clever way of representing that. For a lot of us, it's kind of, as we grow up, we meet people and we come across new ideas and labels and identities that then help us realize who we are. Whereas for Blanca, it's dying and becoming a ghost and becoming kind of out of time, getting access to all of the knowledge of all of the world that lets her have this perspective. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting and a really, really fun book. You may have watched my vlog where I read the oldest and newest books on my TBR. So you may have seen from that I started reading the Persephone book of short stories. I have only read 2 of those stories so far, so I'm not going to do a summary of that book yet. It does not count as being off my TBR, but that one is on the go. Instead of that, I read the next oldest book on my TBR, which was, and this is oldest as in has been on my TBR for the longest, rather than oldest as in was written the earliest. The book I'd owned for the longest was Always and Forever, Lara Jean by Jenny Han, which is book number 3 in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. It had been a long time since I read the first 2, which were books I'd absolutely loved. So it was just really fun and really nostalgic jumping back into this world. I don't think I loved it quite as much as those first two, but it was just really cute. It was only after I finished reading it that I learned that actually the first two books I read years ago had initially just been a duology, and this one was then written as like a fun surprise. So I think that kind of worked, that it was just like a bonus getting to read this book. I didn't need to catch up again with the series and remind myself what happened. This was a fun like next step. What's Lara Jean gonna do next in her life? And I really like Lara Jean as a character. It's a very wholesome series. I really enjoyed it. In that same video, I read the newest book on my TBR, the newest addition to my TBR, which actually changed as the video went on because I bought a book and so I instantly had to read that book, and that was Instructions for a Heatwave by Maggie O'Farrell. I think I read this at like the perfect time because I read it during that mega heatwave that we had, and I also read it in Finsbury Park, and this book is set near Finsbury Park, so it felt very perfect reading this. It felt like I was really in that world. I loved this. This is the second book I've read by Maggie O'Farrell. The first one that I read was Hamnet, and that one was not for me. I'm not a huge historical fiction fan anyway, and that just wasn't one to tempt me into the genre, whereas this one I absolutely loved. So this book is set during the 1976 heatwave, and it's about an Irish family living in North London, and one day the father of this family wakes up, goes to the shops, never comes back. And so his wife calls all of her children, and she's a hilarious character. It takes her a very long time over the phone to get to the point that her husband has gone missing. She's got 3 grown-up children, each going through various crises in their life, and so we follow this family as they come back together to try and solve the mystery of where their father has gone. But actually the mystery, while we do follow that story and we do learn things and go on that adventure, that is kind of second place to actually just learning about these characters, learning about the 3 different children, they're not children, they're grown-ups, where their lives have taken them, the feuds that they have with each other, the love that they have for each other. They're each really interesting characters, particularly the youngest daughter who has been living in the States. I found her fascinating to read about. She is a really intelligent and creative woman who has never been diagnosed with what we as the reader can very clearly see as dyslexia, and so she just believes that she can't read. She's never learnt to read, and she is hiding that from basically everyone in her life. She's never wanted to admit that she can't read, and so she is holding down this job, but her boss doesn't know quite how badly she's falling behind in certain admin tasks. She has a partner who she's embarrassed to admit this to, and so sometimes that communication can go so wrong when he thinks that she is brushing off loving things that he has said to her because he wrote them down. And so I found her absolutely fascinating to read about. I loved this book. Maggie O'Farrell's latest book that's just come out is another historical fiction one about the Medici family, and so I think, based on my 2 different opinions of the 2 books I've read so far, I might skip that one, and I think I'm going to go back into her back catalogue instead and try out some more books there. Now we're going to take a very brief pause while I tell you that this video is very kindly sponsored by Ana Luisa, and I would like to show off some of the gorgeous jewellery that they've sent me this month. So I am one of the Ana Luisa VIP partners. I love working with this company. At this point, my entire jewellery collection is Ana Luisa. I genuinely do wear them every single day, and I've got some really fun new pieces to show you this month. Everything I show you is available on their website now, and if you use my link in the description box below, you will get a mystery discount. You'll always get at the very least 10% off. Sometimes that discount might be higher, so it is really worth clicking the link and going through and seeing how much money you can get off your purchases. So the first one that I want to show you is, unlike any jewelry I've ever owned before, this is a full like body chain. I've never had one of these before, but I love it. So this is called the Abella. If you get it full price, it is £99, but as I said, if you use my link, it will be less than that. So it's just very simple and striking. It's got these cute little diamonds down there. You could wear it with a bikini, I imagine. It's not warm enough for that anymore, so I'm wearing it over my clothes. Ana Luisa also sent me this beautiful bangle, lovely gold bangle, which is not only striking, but also the name of this bangle is Emma. So click through to their website and go and find the Emma bracelet. Look how gorgeous this is. I feel like a sort of dainty Wonder Woman. And finally, I have been saving the best for last. I got sent a new necklace this month, which is going to be my favourite necklace of all time. Look at this. It's a pizza. If only I'd had this in time for my trip to Florence. It's just the most fun necklace I've ever owned. So both the pizza necklace and the Emma bangle are £68 full price. But if you use my link, you'll get them for less than that. I'm not sure you will ever see me without this necklace on in any video ever again. And I'm sure you've heard me say all this before because I have worked with Anna Luisa many times, but the reason I love this brand so much, well, the reasons I love this brand so much, firstly, they are a super sustainable, eco-friendly jewelry brand, which is really important. They offset 100% of their carbon emissions, and the jewelry is really good quality, really fairly priced, pieces that will last with you forever. And I can testify to that because I never take mine off. Right, on with balancing the books, and I think you'll agree I'm doing pretty well so far. The next book that I hauled was Trust by Hernan Diaz. This is one of the books that we published at work, and it was longlisted for the Booker Prize, so I knew it was time for me to read it. So I took this one home from the office and instantly read it. Now this book is so clever. It is one of the cleverest formats for a book that I've read in a long time. It's a book that I have thought about a lot since I finished reading it, and a book that I've talked to a lot of people about. So it's divided into 4 sections. Let me show you. It's really 4 books within a book. So we have the actual book, Trust, here. When you open it up, you get a whole new title page for something called Bonds, a novel by Harold Vanner. And you then go on to read the entirety of the novel Bonds. Don't worry, it's not that long. So that's a whole book called Bonds. You then get to a new title page, My Life by Andrew Bevel. And you find yourself reading what seems to be roughly the same kind of story that you just read in this novel, with the personalities of the characters are different, the names of the characters are different, but it's the same kind of story. But this one is written as what is obviously going to become an autobiography, but is still very much a work in progress. It's just notes of what's going to form an autobiography. That section is a little bit hard to read. I would advise that you can skim read it. Section number 3, A Memoir Remembered by Ida Partenza. And this, which is halfway through the book, is when the book really took off for me. So at this point, you hear the story of a young woman who was hired to write the autobiography of Andrew Bevel, who is this massive guy in Wall Street, a very, very wealthy guy who'd been very successful and who was the subject of a novel called Bonds. So we've read that novel Bonds at the beginning. Then the real man, Andrew, had said, I hate that novel, everyone's reading this book, it totally mischaracterizes me and my wife, I want to set the record straight, I want to write an autobiography and I'm going to hire you to do it for me. So those are the 2 bits that we've read so far, is the novel and then the draft of the autobiography, which never ends up getting published. And it's finally in that section written by Ida where I really started to enjoy it. It really started to feel like the type of story that I like reading. You feel like you're getting closer to the truth, but also throwing up all these mysteries about who Andrew was, but more specifically about who his wife was, because she is characterized so differently in the first 2 bits, and Ida starts to suspect that Andrew's has some other motivation for why he so badly wants to present his wife in a certain way. And all of this is leading up to what you will know if you looked at the contents at the beginning. Section number 4 is going to be written, you're going to hear the wife's voice for the first time. I think I did a very bad job at explaining that. It is confusing. I really enjoyed that middle section written by the woman who's writing his autobiography. And like I said, I do think it's such a clever book. I didn't necessarily enjoy the first half of the book. All the way through I was thinking this is really clever. Even before we got to Ida's perspective, I thought it was really cool. I hadn't read a book like that before, and so I was excited to find out where it was going to go, but I wouldn't say I was enjoying it while reading it. It felt like a little bit of a slog, a little bit of a, okay, see what you're doing, this is really clever, but where's the fun for me? And that fun came in section 3. So it's quite bold to expect you to read like half of the book before it starts becoming really enjoyable to read. That's just what it was personally for me. And then section 4 has some revelations in it that I did not predict, so that was good fun. So a really clever book. I'm sad this one didn't get onto the Booker shortlist because actually I thought it was really interesting, but I haven't read the books that are on the shortlist, so maybe they were better. I hauled this book, Life Drawing by Robin Black. This one Raf got for me after, so we went out to a pub quiz, and then I can't remember what it was, something reminded her of this book, and she was like, I have to get you this book. It's another one that we actually publish at work, but it's from, when did this one come out? before I got there, so I hadn't heard of it before. It looks like it's going to be about a love triangle, if I'm interpreting the description right on the back. That's all I know about this book. More anon when I have read it. The next book I'm going to tell you about, I had a proof and I don't have it with me anymore, and that is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is a book that I hauled in August and instantly read in August. I loved this book. So I took this one on holiday with me to Florence. So actually I finished reading it before the plane even took off. I then passed it around my whole family. On this holiday we had 2 versions of the proof, and so at any time there were at least 2 people on this holiday reading it. It was constantly getting passed around. I thought it was so much fun. I didn't know that I was going to love a book about tennis so much. It's made me feel, well, I say it's made me feel way more interested in tennis. I finished the book and was like, I'm going to get into tennis, I'm going to watch all of the professional matches. I have not watched a single one, but I like the idea of getting into tennis. If you don't already know, Carrie Soto is about a woman who, a fictional woman, who was the tennis champion. She was like the greatest living tennis player. She'd broken loads of records. The most important record that she'd broken was that she had the most Grand Slam titles. At the time the novel starts, she has been retired for 5 years. So she had this amazing career, then she had some injuries, she started to slow down, so she retired knowing that she was the greatest tennis player of all time. But 5 years later, another tennis player has come along who has just tied her record. And Carrie Soto is not going to take that lying down, so she decides to come out of retirement. She's now 37 years old, and she says she's going to come and reclaim her record. What follows is then throughout the book, you literally watch a season of tennis. You watch her, she plays in 4 major tournaments. I'm not going to remember what they all are. The US Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, something else. And we literally like watch the matches. They're described so well that I felt like I was watching tennis, and it was so tense. This is why I don't watch tennis actually. I think it's too tense. It's just too heartbreaking. But this was like watching slow motion tennis because everything is described to you. And it was so much fun. There has been some controversy I heard about this book in that Taylor Jenkins Reid had previously written a Latina character with Evelyn Hugo, even though she's not Latina, and had been told that she hadn't represented that identity very well. And so people were rather surprised when she then released this book where Carrie Soto is also a Latina character, and she's done it again. Obviously I can't speak to that. I'm not Latina. I have no idea if she wrote that identity well or not. I think it was an odd choice for her to do that because from my perspective the character didn't need to be Latina. I didn't think that her identity was particularly explored at all, so there was no real reason for that. So I can see why people are a little annoyed. But in terms of the book just being a page turner, really gripping read, a really fun holiday read, hard recommend. The next book that I read on that holiday was Still Life by Sarah Winman. I will link below to 2 videos. So I've got a video that I filmed in Tuscany with my dad and my sister where we talked about all the books that we'd read, and so you can get a review of Still Life in there as well. I'll also link to a vlog of the whole trip, and you can get my updates as I go along about Still Life. So I don't feel like I need to say too much more about this book because I have talked about it on this channel a lot. I will say that I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's a book that spans decades in these characters' lives, and the characters are just absolutely mad. It's this really eccentric group of characters, from a soldier to an art historian to a pub owner with a sort of dark side to a gorgeous singer who's beautiful but heartbroken and sometimes cruel, to a talking parrot. It's a really like ragtag bunch of characters, and we follow them from Italy to London, back to Italy to Florence. They live in this square, Piazza Santo Spirito, which is where I went to stay in Florence on my trip, specifically because of this book, and all of that was just wonderful. So yeah, I will do click through and watch those videos because I had so much fun reading this book and then going to the places. In terms of what the book is about, it's one of those that's really hard to tell you a plot because it spans such a long period of time that there's so many little vignettes of things that happened. There are some really mundane things that happened that are lovely to read about, and then there are some massive major things based on real historical events. The book starts in the war, so that's one, and then decades later there's something else massive that happens that I actually hadn't known, and it turns out from listening to interviews with the author, that was where she kind of first got the idea, was from researching this real historical event, and that was very dramatic. So yeah, it's like a constant journey that you're on, going ups and downs of these like whole lives of these characters. It's just delightful. I think I've said the word delightful every time I've talked about this book. Then I read Girl Crush by Florence, which I found less delightful. I gave this book a really long review. At the end of my vlog, I had just finished this book and I started talking about it, and I talked for such a long time. But I was watching that video back, I was like, I usually don't talk for this long in a vlog about a book. That felt more like the review that I should have given it in this wrap up. So I'm not going to repeat all of that. If you want to hear my full 3-minute long review, go through and watch that video. Spark notes, I thought the book was funny. I found it, you know, very quick to read. I read the majority of it actually on the plane home and kept me entertained for the whole journey. I wanted to know what was coming. So it was a fun read, but I didn't think it was explored enough. I would have liked to see the book go further. I would have liked to see it get darker, the main character get darker. I think that would have made it more interesting. It's set in the future and I would have liked to see it make better use of that, and I would have liked it to be a little bit less cringy at points. And finally, I hauled a couple more books. So I hauled How to Kill Your Family by Mackie. This is the book that I'm going to be reading with my book club, my friends from uni this month. This is about Grace Bernard, daughter, sister, serial killer. That's all I know about it. That's enough to get my attention. And then I also hauled a book on NetGalley. I got, what's it called? I Have Some Questions for You by Makkai. So I read a book quite a few years ago by Makkai called The Great Believers, which was absolutely beautiful. Just such a wonderful book. And so I've always had my eye on her as a reader that I wanted to read more from. So I was really excited to get this one, NetGalley. Let me just remind myself what it's about. I know it's set at a school, which excited me. It's about a professor looking back on the 4 years that she spent at a New Hampshire boarding school where a classmate was murdered. I mean, like, could a book sound more like it was written for me than that? So all of that means that throughout the month of August, I hauled 6 books onto my TBR, but I read 7 books. So not only are my books balanced, but I've actually decreased the books on my TBR. I now just have 45. That's pretty good. So thank you once again to Anna Luisa for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click through to the link in my description to browse their website for at least 10% off everything. You can get the Emma bangle, my pizza necklace, the Bella body chain, or a massive range of other gorgeous jewelry pieces. Let me know in the comments below if you read any of the same books as me this month, or if you've got any particularly amazing books that you have loved from your reading this month. And I'll see you next time.